Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Odinic School of Mysteries. My name is Bear. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a rather long time, actually, since I've recorded anything. I've actually made an attempt to record a video a few weeks ago, but due to technical issues, I was never able to post it. Though this is a different video altogether, the content, I think, is still going to be largely the same. And it's, how would you put it? It's not exactly, it's not the kind of content that toes the party line, I would say. Here's the deal. Fear is a very powerful tool. It acts on the lower brain. You have a little small portion of the brain that sometimes is called the lizard brain or the abdullah that sits just on the top of the spinal column and actually looks like kind of like a phallus, almost like a lizard, and it sits up there. And it's sometimes called the lower brain or the base consciousness. And that portion of the mind, that portion of the brain, is exclusively responsible for keeping you alive. That is the thing that will judge threats and will say, it will make determinations on whether or not you need to be alert or not. And I don't know how many of you have actually been in a fist fight or a life or death situation or something like that. Or legitimately having your adrenaline course through your veins. But those of you who have will know that it's easy to believe that you have everything under control when you're in fight or flight mode, because what that does, what the lower brain is meant to do, is it slows down time and it makes you feel as though you are calm and collected and reasonable, and it actually really does. It elongates time. Your reflexes are heightened and you feel really warm because all your blood rushes to your vital organs to protect itself. And, your pain tolerance, you have a lot more, you could take a lot more pain when that happens. And so it actually feels fairly zen when you are in this state, but you're not. It's similar to the reasons why smoking feels like a release. Excuse me. Why smoking feels so good. Your brain thinks, I guess you could say your mind thinks, that it's actually being relaxed when you smoke. But actually it's quite the opposite. Smoking is extremely stressful on your body, but it tricks your brain into thinking that it's actually really nice. Someone compared it once to finally putting your feet up after a long days of work. It's like that feeling where you feel like you're in Zen and you're under control, but you're not. And fear is old school mind control technique, because your brain isn't thinking. It is more than happy to receive information. And because it is responsible for keeping you alive, that's all it's responsible for. It's responsible for keeping your blood pumping, your lungs breathing, to keeping your genes in the gene pool. So that's where you have sexual drive comes from that. It's responsible for getting you the nutrients that you're required to keep alive. So the need to feed comes from there. And because it is solely and exclusively responsible for keeping you alive, it is going to do whatever it takes to do that. And that fear could be really easily exploited. And this is what we've seen lately. Is we've seen people who, because they're afraid of this virus, because they're afraid of chaos, they're afraid of losing their money or their warm beds or whatever have you, we have actually seen people beg, get on their hands and knees and beg to have their rights taken away. I forget his name now. The mayor of New York City actually requested that people snitch on their neighbors. That you send messages to the government and tell on your neighbors and your friends who aren't obeying the government's decree. And so, I mean, I'm not here to tell you what to do. Let me just state this right off the bat. I'm not here to tell you what to do or what to think or how to feel. But as free men and women, you need to decide where that line is. You have to decide how far is too far, how far am I willing to go along with this? You know, my wife and I, we've talked about this. We sat down and we've called it the talk. You know, how much are we willing to put up with? How far is too far? You know, this is a good practice for anything. Let's say that you're a liberal. How far left are you willing to go? Or I should say, how far how far left do you have to go before you're considered a conservative? I think is the way I heard it put. Or vice versa, if you're a conservative. How far right does it have to go? Does the country have to go before you're considered liberal? Even as a conservative, how far right is too far right? How far left is too far left? My wife and I, we sat down. This was before my last attempt at a video, so this was probably about 4 weeks ago now. 3 weeks ago, maybe. We sat down and said, okay, what are we willing to put up with? How far are we willing to go? And I was willing to go along with the social distancing, especially at the beginning, because my wife and I, we had already kind of decided that we wanted to do that anyway. I live in the Portland area. Portlanders are very notoriously riotous, I guess is the word. And I just didn't want my kids and family exposed to that kind of stuff. And so we went ahead and pulled our kids before we had to pull our kids. We pulled our kids from school. And we went ahead and started social distancing before it was even required. So when our governor, Kate Brown, decided that to make it law that you had to socially distance, I wasn't very thrilled that it was mandated, but I went ahead and went along with it because we had already decided to do it. But that was kind of the line in the sand for me. I was going to say this much and no more. And it's controversial, I know, but I'm not willing to put on a mask to go outside. I'm not going to wear rubber gloves to go to the store. That's too much. But, you know, my wife, on the other hand, she's willing to do a lot more than I am. She's willing to put on the gloves and wear the mask and that kind of stuff. So each person kind of needs to decide where that line is. And we're seeing there's more and more stories coming out all the time of these little petty tyrants who are arresting mothers for taking their kids to the park, who are arresting people for walking by themselves in an open field out in the country, who are governing through fear and intimidation. And like I said, fear is old school mind control. And we see this, and it's been used. It's it's old school because it's super effective. You keep your mouth shut about secret things you believe in because you are afraid. Keyword is you're afraid of the backlash, right? Let's say you're a Holocaust denier, or I don't know, you believe that, what's another big one? What's another big conspiracy theory? Like 9/11 was a hoax, or something like that. Right? Pick your flavor of the month conspiracy theory. You're not going to tell people or talk about that, your little secret shame, quote unquote, because you're afraid of how people are going to react to you. You're not going to go outside and hang out at the park because you're afraid of the government. And the dirty little secret here, and this is the thing I think is really important to remember, is that there is a secret law. It's a fake law. It's not a real law, but it's a law that is believed. And that is that what real authority is the right to do violence. My son just woke up. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. My son is teething like crazy, and he wakes up quite a bit. So I had to go give him some more Tylenol. Anyway, there's a fake law. And it's kind of one of those little hidden secret things that people don't realize is a thing, but is actually a thing. It's not a spiritual law, but it's a man-made imposed counterfeit. And this counterfeit law basically states that all authority is derived from the right to commit violence. Meaning, put in layman's terms, true authority, as according to this counterfeit law, is the ability to say that if you don't do what I say you should do, you don't do what I want, I get to come to your house with a gun and force you to. I get to threaten you. I get to say that if you don't do what I want, I get to put you in chains and cart you off and charge you money and force you to behave in the way I deem you should behave. It's like, for example, I can't tax my neighbors. Right. I can't declare war on my neighbor. At least not in the sense that the government can declare war. I can't force my neighbor to give me money in exchange for protection. It's called extortion. But governments can do that. And we let them do that. Governments get to show up at your house with guns and say you have to give us X amount of money or else. And sure, they say it goes to roads and that kind of stuff. I'm not even against pitching in. I think you should pitch in. You're part, as a nation, you're part of the community, and you should pitch in to help. What I'm not for is if you say you have to pitch in or else. Or else we're going to take your kids away. We're going to lock you in a cage. And if you resist, we get to shoot you. And that's where we're at. You have to ask yourself, is it okay? Is it okay that there's a really famous viral video I was just watching this evening of a woman in Idaho who was letting her kids play at the park. And if you have small children, you want them to go play at the damn park. My kids are bouncing off the freaking walls right now. And if you're an exhausted mother and you just got to get your kids something to do, the park is a necessary evil, right? I don't want to call it an evil, but that's what society is calling right now. If you go to the park, if you listen to the news media, if you go to the park, you will get coronavirus and you will die. is how they're kind of trying to push it or trying to sell it. Cops came and said she had to leave, and she said no, and they arrested her for it in front of her kids. So this is the deal. This is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. How far are you willing to go? There's a very famous line. In fact, I'll probably put it on the background image of this video because it's that important. It was Abraham Lincoln. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to... I'm doing this really late at night and my mind just left me. Benjamin Franklin. It was Benjamin Franklin that said that if you sacrifice a little liberty for a little bit of freedom, you deserve neither and you will lose both. And that is a very sobering thought, and that's one of those things that we're dealing with right now. In fact, there's another quote I'm looking it up right now from Dwight Eisenhower. It's kind of along the same lines. It says, if you want total security, go to prison. There you're fed, you're clothed, you're given medical care, and so on. The only thing lacking is freedom. I'm going to read that again because it's important. And again, this quote is from Dwight Eisenhower. It says, if you want total security, go to prison. There you're fed, clothed, given medical care, and so on. The only thing lacking is freedom. And that's what we're dealing with right now, my friends. They don't call it house arrest because that's not palatable. They don't even really want to call it quarantine, even though they'll sometimes admit it. They use soft, simple language for us stupid people so that we don't freak out, and they call it social distancing. I'm social distancing right now. That sounds very polite and very nice. But really, it's house arrest. You're not allowed to leave. You've done nothing wrong. You've broken no law. And yet, they have totally taken your rights away. They say to the American people, they say to the world that you cannot be trusted as free-thinking adults to make the right decisions for yourself. So the long arm of the government, by threat of guns, by threat of violence, you will do what I say or else. And so now what's happened? We'll stick to the Dwight Eisenhower quote here. If you want total security, go to prison. There you'll be fed, clothed, and given medical care. What's happened? Stimulus packages. They're proposing universal basic income, universal medical, single payer programs. It all sounds really nice. Everyone likes to be given free stuff. But what's happened? And so now this is the thing. You really have to decide what's important to you. freedom, or so let's put it this way. Let's back up for a second. Before we get into that, let's talk about this for a second. Chaos in cosmos. Chaos in cosmos. Chaos is the thing that exists outside of the walls of the city. It's where the wild things are. There's this horrible misconception that chaos is the disillusionment, right? It's the uncontrolled, where nothing is orderly at all. It all just turns into just randomness. That's not what chaos is. Chaos is the land that exists outside of the city. It's where it's true that outside the city there's lions, there's tigers, there's bears, there's the warlock that lives up in the castle way deep in the dark, dark woods. But chaos is also where you go hunting. That's where you find fresh food. It's where you grow your crops. That's where you keep your livestock. If you're in a medieval Europe, for example, chaos is where you had to go to find a wife for the next town over, because towns and villages were so small that if you tried to marry someone in your own town, you're probably going to be marrying a relative, which happened. Chaos is, in the mystery schools, it's known as the creative principle. It's the thing that makes creation happen. That's why it's called the Mother Goddess. That's why it's also associated with the night sky. Daylight is like the cosmos, and darkness is the chaos. Sometimes it's called the Sacred Mother. Sometimes it's called the Lady in Black. Sometimes it's called the Night Mother. It's called the Sacred Feminine. It's the thing that gives birth to new things. Because if you don't leave the order of the city, you will die. Because nothing will ever be born. Nothing will ever come back into creation. And so, I grew up in the mountains of Eastern Oregon. The town I spent most of my growing up years in had about 200 people in it. And that was only about half the year when people would come in from the bigger cities like Portland to go hunting. The rest of the time, there was almost nobody there, maybe 150 people. And if you grew up in the mountains, spent any time in the mountains at all, you'll see that there's tremendous amount of order in chaos. Again, it's true that the lions and the bears and the tigers and the wolves and all those things are out there, but that's also where the stars are. That's where the wildflowers are. That's where the trickling streams are. That's where the butterflies live. That's where the fairies are. There is a tremendous, unfathomable amount of order inside of chaos. And likewise, it's just the inverse. Let's say you go inside the walls of the city. You step inside the walls of the city into what we call cosmos, the ordered universe. And there's stoplights, and there's sidewalks, and there's laws. And for all the order, there is an unbelievable amount of disorder inside of order, isn't there? There's crime, there's murder, there's disease, there's pestilence, there's rodents, there's all kinds of stuff. All kinds of bad stuff that happens in the city. An earthquake might come and destroy the whole thing. Wars break out, rivalries break out. There's tremendous amount of disorder in the city. And that's why, that's one of the biggest esoteric meanings behind the yin-yang, the famous yin-yang symbol, where you have a circle that's half white and half black, but in each half of it, on the black side there's a little speck of white, and on the white side there's a little speck of black. That's because in the chaos there's there's order, and in the order there's chaos. And so they work together. They're two sides of one principle. They're the mother and father of creation. And so here's the deal. Going back to the Dwight Eisenhower quote again. And I'm going to read it again for like the 6th time probably, because it's important. If you want total security, go to prison. There you're fed, clothed, given medical care, and so on. The only thing lacking is freedom. This is the point, my friends. This is the point. You don't get to have two things at once. If you want freedom, you have to live in chaos. You have to risk the wilds. If you want security, you get no freedom. Security is the walls of the city. Freedom is the wilds outside where the wild things are. And you have to, you don't get, maybe I should rephrase that, because I think I'm saying it wrong. There is a delicate balance. You have to have a balance of both. I recognize, I think I probably made a mistake in saying what I did. I think what I'm trying to say is you have to make a decision. Right. Whether you want to risk chaos and get your freedom, or live under tyranny and get security. So, I have a friend of mine who lived in communist Russia. And if you listen to this person, they're very secure. It was very secure there in communist Russia, but no freedom. And people right now are begging for that. People are begging for the government to take total control over their lives. People are afraid of chaos. They're afraid of the wilds. They're afraid of the unknown. And so, in order to protect themselves, because they've been force-fed this fear-based diet from the media that everyone thinks they're going to die, and because everyone thinks they're going to die, everyone is terrified, and because they're terrified and their Abdullahs are firing like crazy trying to keep them alive, they're begging, their lower brains are begging the government to say, hey, you guys, please take our freedoms away. Please, 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 please. I'll give you all our liberty just so long as I'm safe. And and those are and that's exactly what the governments want. They want you afraid. They want you divided. It makes you easy to rule. And it's people like me who come on here and say no. And this is the real deal, right? If freedom means anything in this world, if we're a free people, if we're free men and women, Freedom, if it means anything at all, it is the right to say no. It's the right to say no. And it's scary to say no, because saying no means chaos. That woman who said no to the police officer when he was telling her to leave the park. Police come and say, you got to get out of the park. And she said no. By being a free person, she risked chaos and she got arrested. But she is a freer person than most of us right now. True power, my friends. And this is something I really need you to hear me on. It's really important. Real power. True power. Not the fake bullshit right to violence thing that most people believe in. Real, true, honest to God power is something that nobody can ever take away from you. You could be locked in prison for the rest of your life and still be a free man or a free woman if you have real power. It's something that nobody can take away from you. The ability to say no. And it's important that you think about that. It's really important that you think about that. You don't get to be in charge over me because you just decided one day that you get to be in charge over me, which is exactly what has happened with the government. The government has said, congratulations, I'm your boss. You have to do what I say or else. And if you're truly free, you would say no. You know? And it's heretical to say this. And it's very possible that YouTube won't even allow me to put this up. And if that happens, I'll have to put on a podcast and just link it or something like that. Because it goes against the power establishment. You know, this isn't the kind of thing that people like to hear. It's certainly not the kind of stuff that power establishments want to hear. They want you to want the government. There's this meme that I love, and I first saw it. There's a guy that teaches esoterica and occult sciences and that kind of stuff by the name of Mark Passio. And he was one of the first real anarchists that I ever really met. Well, I didn't meet him in person, but that I really came across like on the internet. And the meme is a picture of Jesus, and it says, "I am an anarchist, but all my I'm gonna try and do this without smiling through it. It says that I am an anarchist, but all my followers are statists." And that's exactly what it is. And that's the difference. And so if you think of it through that way, let's say that if we say that statism is the worship of government, most Christians are statists. Most people on earth are statists. They worship the state. And if you don't believe that the state is a religion, you have another thing coming. I got a bridge to sell you. Because the state is a religion. They have their churches, and you go to the churches, and you pay tithes to them, you worship it, you elect priests to rule over it, who set doctrine and tenets for its followers to adhere to. And, this is the thing. I mean, atheists say all the time, oh, we don't believe in a God. We don't believe in a God. You absolutely believe in a God. It may not be a deity like a Jesus or an Odin, but you definitely have a God. You definitely attend its churches, and you pay tithes to it every day. And this is what people always debate all the time. Like, what is the mark of the beast? It's this thing that is on your hand and in your forehead. And people say it's a chip, or they say it's all this other stuff. And, maybe that's the case, and that's possible. Excuse me. But really what it is, if you're familiar with occult sciences at all, you'll know it's based off of the precept, so I think, so I feel, so I act. Right? The what I think about and what I do with my hands. The things that I produce. And there's a famous occultist once who said that if you want to know what your God is, think about what is the thing you think about the most. For some people, it's money and wealth. Some people, it's government. Even among Christians, and people who say that they believe in God and that there is, that there really is no other God before them, but really, that's not true. Sometimes their God is religion itself, and not the creator of all things. They worship the created thing rather than the creator, who is forever praised. Amen, as it says in Paul. They worship the religion. They worship the government. They worship money and status. And they worship their cars. And they worship their fishing poles. And they worship everything except the true authority. And you got to know the difference. You got to stand up and decide where that line is. Where is that line? Where you're willing to put your foot down and say, no further. I will go no further. And I know, speaking for myself, that really became clear to me. My wife came home. It was the first real shopping trip after the lockdown. And you could tell that it really freaked her out because her eyes were like wild. And she left all the bags of food outside of the apartment, and she brought them in, and one at a time, and was wiping everything down with alcohol. And I was like, wait for things to cool down because I'm smart. I was like, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to live like that, in that kind of fear. But that's one of those things that is like that line in the sand that's like, no, this is too far. This is a line that's too far. This is beyond where I'm willing to go. I'm not willing to live in that kind of fear. And you have to decide that for yourself, where that line is. And if you're a thinking person who could pull yourself out of that lower brain, animalistic, reactive part of your subconscious, if you're the kind of person who can do that, then you're a free person. You're not a slave. You're a free-thinking, self-willed individual. And you're not someone who could be just lured into a trap just because other people are freaking out. So, I don't know. Maybe I'll get banned for this. I don't know. I really don't know. But it's one of those things you need to think about. Um, but I don't care at this point. You know, you got to be willing to speak up. You have to be willing to be brave and say, um, screw you guys. You know, screw you and your fear porn and your disaster porn and all the other kinds of frightening things you could show me, and say, I'm going to be a free person. I'm going to think for myself, and I'm not going to fall into your traps. And so be it, so far as I'm concerned. All right, my friends, I love you so much. I want you to be safe. I want you to be free. And I hope everyone is doing okay out there. It's scary. But, you know, one of the things my teacher told me, one of the things my dad taught me, and one of the things we teach my kids as well, so I've gotten it from a lot of people, is that you don't get to be brave unless you're afraid. Bravery isn't lack of fear. It's doing what is necessary in spite of being afraid. And so, be brave out there, my friends. Stand tall. Be free. All right. Ice to the skies, travelers. All right. Bye.